Hello, good
Good
morning.
morning.
So you've been in the podcast business for 10 years,
I'm
11
coming up on
years.
10 years in September. Yeah.
When you started the podcast in cybersecurity, how many other podcasts
There was a
were around?
bunch. I mean, some of the ones I listened to were like Security Justice. There was Chris Nickerson's, and there was probably, I don't know, five or six that were pretty good that I was listening to at the time. So there was a bunch already.
I think for the last 18 months, because we lost the human touch of going to conferences and talking to each other, we saw a lot of activity of people starting their own podcasts,
Yeah.
including myself with Dimitri on the security architecture. What they are kind of wondering what's important if people start the podcast because I'm afraid people start the podcast, do a couple of episodes, don't see traction, and
Yeah.
then stop.
I think
What
Yeah,
make
so
one good?
I don't know if I don't know about good, but I know what keeps us going. I originally started this because I wanted to have a show that was office friendly, that like had a topic that people would care about, right? So it's based in cybersecurity, but it's loosely about our industry. We dive into leadership, we dive into like some really fun topics, national security, some technical topics. So I try to bring a pretty wide audience in. Um, and I think for me, what mattered was having a sense of purpose. Like, what are we trying to do? And my goal was educate people and distribute knowledge and give access to people that ordinarily most folks would like. We don't get to talk to Dan Gear. Ordinarily, we don't get to talk to a lot of these folks that I have the pleasure of interviewing on the podcast. And so it's like a conversation with somebody that I probably would never get to talk to otherwise, an excuse to just ask questions and just chat.
So if somebody listening to us, and I hope a lot of people are going to listen to us and watch to us, and they have an idea in my mind, oh, I want to start my own podcast, and I have maybe talking about malware, maybe talking about what's happening in the world, who is attacking who, what they need to do to actually start one in your
Um,
mind.
man, I would lay out the first 5 to 6, 7 episodes, like what you're going to talk about. Decide on your format. Are you going to interview? Are you going to talk about current topics? Are you going to talk about? Are you going to have a guest? Are you going to have a co-host? Decide on your intro and your outro. So are you going to have music at the beginning, at the end? Are you going to, like, we decided on a tune that I loved, and Deep Down by Josh Gabriel, and that was awesome. And I side note, I actually hit him up on Twitter like years ago and said, "Hey, I bought the rights to this. I'm trying to use it as a podcast intro. What do you think?" And he's like, "Oh, I love it. Keep it up." I was like, "Well, that's great." Like, one of my favorite producers. But have some of that laid out. That'll give you a structure so that you don't always feel like you're just throwing something together. Structure for me is, like we originally did interview news, interview news, interview news, and at some point, I can't even tell you when, we just sort of switched to the kind of the Larry King format, if you will. Like, find somebody interesting and go, all right, let's just chat and see what happens, right? Do you want to have a pre set up series of questions or topics? Are you going to bring in sponsors? Are you going to entertain, because it's going to happen? PR people pitching you ideas. Are you going to go on your own? Like, have some of these things laid out. I think the fundamentals are very simple. Like, what's your opening going to sound like? What's your closing going to sound like? What's the format? Um, what's the length of time? Where do you want to post it out? So who's your audience? And then from there on, right, just kind of let it flow. But and of course, this. You want to answer the question: are you going to edit?
Yes, yes, it's a one I was thinking to ask. Is it this something you're gonna spend 2 3 hours after because it's at least X2 X3 to listen to yourself removes arms, ohms, and other stuff
I
or not?
started doing that originally. So if you go back through our episodes, I originally started taking out the ums and uhs and. After a while, it just became the conversations to me. They sounded grammatically and better, to the English from the English language perspective, but they didn't sound natural. So it's made me more conscious of the ums and uhs as I talk, right? As a speaker, as a presenter, as a host. But also, I try to edit as little as possible. In fact, we've gone so far as we had a guy whose doorbell rang. He ran off, got the doorbell. James and I kept talking during it. He came back. We're like, all right, let's just keep going because it just flowed well, right? We've had some interesting things where we were interviewing. I can't Chloe Mazdagi, I think a while back. I think that was her episode, and her cat just carefully sauntered across the camera in front of her, and then like turned around and walked right back. Like, look, I'm important. We thought it was hilarious, so we published it. But it gives it that personal element, so it doesn't feel like you're watching. I mean, unless that's the format you're going for, right? If you want to be the 5 o'clock news for cybersecurity, cool. But just keep that format. But ours is very conversational, so I chose the unedited, the unscripted style, and I think it works for Down the Security Rabbit Hole, and it has been.
What is the minimum gear you think somebody in the beginners need to have?
I was the absolute minimalist. I originally bought a blue snowball mic, and then I got fancy and bought the Yeti. I thought about, I had an XLR mic and I had a couple other things that I had bought. The one I'm using right now is the Yeti, the USB Yeti. It's fantastic. It's super cheap. It's a nice condenser mic with a pop filter on top of it, plugged into USB on my Mac, and a camera that you can,
So basically, you're saying there's no excuses.
Yeah.
You don't need a studio for $5,000.
I mean,
you just
look,
need to
if
start.
you want to do HD and awesome, look, listen, I'm at that age where HD is probably not going to do me any favors. So the blurriness is still a little bit okay. But look, there's to record a podcast, you need a microphone and headphones, and if you want a camera just to see your guests, because that's always good, right? Personal interaction. But
as a cybersecurity professional, how podcast made you a better professional?
I get to learn. I think that's the most interesting part about this is every conversation I have even with somebody that I know well, all the way to somebody that I've never talked to before, I learn something out of it. You come out of a 30 to 35-minute conversation and you sort of walk out of it thinking, I did not know that. And there's episodes where about 5 seconds in, I'm going, all right, hold on. I need to start taking notes because this is a lot of information. And then there's episodes where I've listened to the show 5-6 times myself, not just to boost my own download ratings, but because I want to listen to them locally. But there's just so much information coming from somebody. So if you have good guests, I would say if you're going to start something, aim for guests that will challenge you, that know more than you, which should be a lot of people, right? Lots of people know more than all of us. And learn something, because if you're learning, that means your audience is as well.
Okay, so I'll go deeper there. How you become a better host, because guests would like to come to good hosts and ask good questions.
I would say to become a really good guest, become a really good host, do a little bit of research about the person you're interviewing, so you know their background, you've seen them, either get interviewed or on a show or on mic or something somewhere, and so you have something to talk about, because some guests get nervous, right? You'll ask a question that you think will take a 5-minute answer and they'll go, and then you go, oh heck. And so what do you ask next? How do you keep the conversation going? How do you keep questions going? How do you drive and steer when you know what you want them to answer, but they're not quite getting there? So you kind of nudge and push, and without making it sound robotic, right? So,
Ralph, thank you very much. I hope it will help people to start more podcasts. Even so, we have quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of good material out there. I think that there's plenty of room for more. You just find your niche. That's my one piece of advice to everybody: is find your niche. Find something that you can do better than somebody that's doing it right now, and do it for the right reasons. Like some people want to make money on it, which is fine. Some people want to be famous. I want to just bring information to people, and I think that that's what makes Down the Security Rabbit Hole good, and has been around for 10 years. Is we have a mission, and we look to fulfill it every time we publish. Thanks,
Awesome.
bud.
Thank you.